friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Prosperous Empath. So if you've been here for a while, or if you know a little bit of my story, then I'm sure you've heard me talk before about my passion for spreadsheets. I am a spreadsheet aficionado, and for most of the years in my business, I have managed every aspect of my business on Excel. And earlier, a couple of years ago, I met our guest today in an online community that the two of us were a part of. And she helped me broaden my perspective and take a manually focused, user heavy process that I manually managed on Excel. And she helped me automate so much of my business using ClickUp. And I'm so excited to have Alicia Lozano on the podcast today to talk about her expertise as a business operations and change management consultant. We're going to talk through and answer some of the questions around how do you get your team to buy in and follow standard operating procedures? How do you make your client experience pop while automating some of it in the background? How do you build a sustainable business as a multi-passionate entrepreneur? How do you know where to start with systems, and what are the core systems that should be developed in your business first? I think so many of these questions new entrepreneurs don't even know where to start. And sometimes seasoned and veteran entrepreneurs as well don't even know where to lean in next. This has certainly been part of my own experience and my own story, really looking at how I can extract myself from my business and create more systems to automate and streamline the way we do things. So my guest today, Alicia Lozano, is a business operations consultant. She partners with minority women-owned small businesses and corporate side hustlers who are ready to take their business full-time and simplify their path to wealth. She helps her clients streamline their own client experience processes through done with you and done for you operations strategy and consulting so that they can start to fully experience life and have the extra income to invest in the causes that will change the world. She's the founder and CEO of an online community called Zero to Entrepreneur, and she is just a high energy, high impact, incredibly detail-oriented woman entrepreneur. I am delighted to have Alicia on the podcast with me today. She is an amazing entrepreneur and amazing dog mama to 4 rescue pups. And I really just adore her in our conversation today. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Alicia, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
For my audience, Alicia has done some of her magic in the backbones of my business. So I'm just super excited to have you here today to share you with my audience because I think your work is pretty amazing, and working with you was like a total magical experience. So,
oh, thank you.
Totally
Love it.
So maybe we could just kick it off by you sharing a little bit about who you are and your story.
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Alicia Lozano, and I am from San Antonio, Texas, born and raised. I lived in California for like a little bit, like 8 months. It was awesome. That's a story for another day.
Wait, what
But
city? But what city?
oh, in Southern California, kind of up and down Southern California. So the
Okay.
Valley, North Hollywood, which was amazing because it's super artsy in North Hollywood. Yeah, so it was good times when I was dancing and acting out there. Crazy
Amazing.
times. Yeah. But yeah, so most recently I have an HR background. So I came from HR for 7 years and focused in employee relations and employment law. And then I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And like some people that might be listening to the podcast that maybe started their journey the same way, I had no idea what I was really good at and what I really wanted to do. So I went on that journey for about 3 years until I landed on writing my very first SOP. And that was through just a friend of mine who randomly asked me if I would help her in her business. And she's like, I'm actually hiring for this. And I know that you're like trying to be a coach, you're trying to do all these, other things, but I need help in my back end. Like, is this something that you would do? And my mouth said yes. And my brain was like, what the heck is an SOP? But I was like determined, right? I'm like, I mean, and she's a friend and definitely knew all my skills at that time. And so I was writing my very first SOP for her business, and I had a literal physical energetic shift in my body. And I knew that after 3 failed businesses before in different spaces, that this was it. And so about 2 months later, I quit my job and started the industry of operations. I didn't even know what to call myself. I think I was doing more in her business. I was doing more of an OBM role because I was doing some team management. I was doing process improvement and creation of SOPs and putting systems together. And I started to find that I found I just saw gaps, and I've always just been the person to see like a few steps ahead of like, hey, this is like this if this then that theory of like figuring out like, okay, let's prepare for this, or let's look at that if this happens, like let's have this template or do that. So I was really able to nurture my skill set in operations in her business. And then from her, like thankfully and luckily, because I know this isn't always the story, but I was able to have like client after client based on referrals. And so I just kept getting experience after experience after experience. And so until I didn't, that's also another story from another day. But yeah, so that's how I started in operations. And so now I'm an operations consultant.
And just
And
for, I'm so happy that I know what both of those acronyms stand for.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But for my audience who maybe doesn't, like, you said SOP, OBM.
Yep.
Do you want to just maybe define them?
Absolutely, absolutely, for sure. Thank you so much. So, an OBM stands for an online business manager, and officially, I guess, I think in the online world, like there's a lot of fluidity in the labels that people have as far as like, or the titles that people have and the actual work that they do. So I think an OBM essentially is supposed to be somebody who is helping with managing the team. They could do some ops and process management, a lot of project management. It's all about like that management role. But I know a lot of OBMs who are also implementers. So that's why I say there's a lot of like fluidity in like what somebody does. You really have to ask like it could differ between OBM to OBM. And then SOP stands for standard operating procedures, which are essentially the steps by steps that you take to go from a point A to a point B in your business. So that could mean that an SOP can be a way of documenting a business process. So this podcasting process end to end. Like you had to book me and you had to ask me questions, and then we had to schedule the event, and then we have to have the event, and then there's essentially probably a million steps, right, that go into like what happens after we close this interview. And so that process from like A to Z could be documented on a standard operating procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you worked kind of behind the scenes in my business, you helped automate some of those processes, and you also helped kind of draw out some mind maps for how things could look, that kind of if then thing that you were just talking about. And
Yeah.
something I noticed as you were working is like how much I admired the way your brain thought.
Mm-hmm.
So how does your brain think?
I don't know. I think that, as I do more of this work, I feel like a lot of what comes up is just noticing the detail, and then being able to forecast what that next step could be, like the possibility of what it might look like. So things like, if somebody books a call and what happens, and if somebody doesn't book a call, what happens, like just something like that. And so I just think I think my brain has always operated that way. And so um, just doing this work in operations, I think brings it out a lot more. So yeah, to answer your question, how it works, I just think that I enjoy thinking through things. I also notice that I'm a slow processor. So I think that goes into how I operate too. So I always thought it was like a learning disability, because if you ask me a question, like I'm not the first person to answer, or like I'm not the most witty, right? Like I'm not like, I'm also not good with what people call like clapbacks.
What's
Where
that?
it's like where you say something, and if it's snarky and then like I say something back to you, how there's some people that are like
Got
really
it.
good with the comebacks, right? They call them
Yeah.
like slapbacks. So I'm not really good with the comebacks, but I'll definitely be the person that'll be in the shower like 2 hours later and be like, boom, that's what I wanted to say. So yeah, I think that goes into the way that my brain just processes information is slower. And I think there is a test called, I think it's like the Colby, which I haven't taken, but I've looked up some research about operators and like how they're always a number. Don't quote me, but I think they're always like a number 8 or something like that. And what they call like slow starts. And so I think that I just naturally, that's just who I am, and the way that I process information.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I know that you and I were chatting before we hit record about how we're both highly sensitive people. And
Mm-hmm.
in some of the research that I've done for myself about being an HSP, like something that's been really healing for me is learning that one quality of HSPs are that we are deeply and highly conscientious and deep thinkers, which means that we're naturally slower processors because we're thinking through all the potential consequences or ramifications. Or, for me, like I think more from, I don't think the way your brain thinks, like I don't necessarily think from a systematic way of thinking, but I do think from an emotional realm, like how will this person feel and what could be the impact, and, all of like,
Mm-hmm.
all of the how this will affect other people, how this will impact me. Like I kind of think through that lens, but it does have
Mm-hmm.
me respond slowly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still learning about HSP, and just like I think we talked a little bit about it before. How I've given myself compassion for like this. I guess it's like a label, right? Giving ourselves this label, but also a better understanding of why we act the way we do, or why we might say things the way we say them, or just different, or why I feel the way that I do. And I think that, yeah, I'm still learning this new world, but it definitely has also given me compassion for how I operate the business for sure. And in my capabilities and limitations of like what feels good and what doesn't, for sure.
Hmm. Well, I'd love to shift gears there because, last year when we were um, connecting and we were part of a community together, like uh, you were you were promoting on social media all the time, like this your 4 hour daily work week
Yeah.
and 4 hour per day, right? It
For
was
our
you're
days.
working
Yeah.
4 hour
For our
days.
days.
There we
Yeah.
go. And I wonder if there's a connection there with, what you were just sharing around working 4 hours and giving yourself compassion and allowing yourself more kind of grace to build your business your way and what that has looked like for you.
For sure. Yeah. Like I think that to make the transition from working like 13-hour days to just like, I like literally it was day and night. Like I made the decision in the very next day. I cut my hours to 4 hours. And I think that I think there was a lot of building that took me there, but I did feel a lot more compassion of, but it was compassion, but I think compassion was the result. I think what came before compassion was actually anger,
Mm-hmm.
because I was just upset that I had to be working so hard. And I was tired. Like I mentioned, I had a few businesses before. So if you are listening and you've been on this like entrepreneur wheel and like trying to like make it work and like trying to really find yourself, like there's so many different nuances that go into being a successful entrepreneur, and there's so much skill set and there's so much like awareness that oftentimes when that's not developed yet, right, we're not like quote unquote making it. And I think that up to that point, even though I had seen some success, I wasn't hitting where I wanted to be. And so, and I was working like double time, right? And I had been working double time like that for years and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I think that I was just ready mentally to just stop and say, like, if it burns down, it burns down. Like it is what it is. And so that was like more of like my attitude. But after that, I think that what came of it was definitely compassion for just an understanding that, hey, like literally maybe a month after I did that, probably even sooner, I think I closed like my biggest deal ever on like a Word document. And I am somebody that would never send out a Word document as a proposal or any like, because it's like, you know better, right? And I'm like, I know better. I can make this beautiful. But it was like something new that I was asked for. And so it was custom. And I was sticking to 4 hours and I didn't have any time to create this beautiful proposal. So I just threw my hands up and said, here's the basics. Like, this is what I do and what I can do. I did that in about like 15 minutes, sent it over, gave them the access, like all old school, gave them the access to the link and booked a client that way, which was my largest client to date at that point. So yeah, I think especially that like those moments were supported of my idea and what I was doing. I think it really did help me with the compassion, of like accepting that I don't have to work as hard. And so it brought that more awareness, like there is another way. And then we talked about earlier that I got back to working hard because I got back to pushing new offers. I got back, like I'm building the membership out, but I also know that like I'm conscious of that I'm making the choice and that it doesn't have to be this way,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm making the choice. And I think that goes into some other things like psychological things that I'm like, probably room for my therapist, right? But like, I think that, yeah, so that's definitely to your point, I grew some compassion for myself in the way that I wanted to show up and run my business for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I also hear, I mean, first of all, I'm so happy that you shared that because, you know, my audience is really interested in building a business that supports their ideal lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that through your willingness to just like pull the boundaries up hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? 4 hours a day, that is it. Like it actually allowed you to reassess what's possible and
Mm-hmm.
give you more access to, reinventing your business on your own terms and by your own design. And then
For
not
sure.
when you choose to work or overassert yourself. Like, it is on your terms, and you know that you have the capacity to pull back the reins again when the timing's right. And, something I talk about a lot is like the reminder that there are stages in every business. And at
Mm-hmm.
different stages of business, there are different things that are required of us as visionaries. And that is completely okay.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I hear like how much permission you're giving yourself to really embrace the stage that you're in.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Like I said, it's the awareness and also like the reason that I was able to, I think it's important to explain the reason that I was able to do it from one day to the next, because I'm also a person that doesn't like to like talk in theory or like to make people think that like if they can't do it from one day to the next, that they're not like good enough or whatever. So I think it's important to also say that the reason that I was able to have that type of business is my offers were aligned. I had systems already in place, and I had two team members supporting my business. So because of that, I just had to like let go, and I had to like trust my systems and like do all of that in order for this to actually happen. But yeah, so that needs to be in place too.
Yeah,
For you to have a realistic, if you're going to pull back that much, I think you realistically you need to have those things in place. Like, at least for me, I don't know about anybody else's path or what they've done, but for me, that's the only reason I was able to do that, because I know that the only reason my marketing was kept up is because I had somebody writing my captions, I had somebody posting my content. So all of that was I just had to show up to a call once a month, and literally my blogs, everything would be done for me. So my marketing was pretty much on autopilot. So yeah, so just things like that. I think it's important to note that um, if you are trying to cut back, that you recognize that those are some of the foundational things that need to be in place.
totally. And I also appreciate you just shining a little bit of the light about what you also do for your clients in the back end, like kind
Yeah,
of the automation and the workings that you help become seamless.
for sure. Yeah, it's helpful. I mean, I think that I feel like if you fight systems, it may be because you're not like people are influencing you to do things a certain way versus like understanding that systems, yes, it could be automation and tech and all of those things as well, but systems could also be a process for just making your task easier. Like I what comes to mind is like a name for everything, or a place for everything, and everything in its place, right? Like even just having some organization around business, like that's a system. Like every time I create a doc, I'm going to create it in this way. Every time I create this type of doc, I'm going to place that doc into this particular folder so that I know that I don't have like five or six versions of the same thing, because I know that I'm always referring back to this particular folder. So I think when it comes to systems, it doesn't always have to be that, but um, definitely automation and like getting all of that. I mean, you saw too from like our work, like it does make your life easier and will cut back time, and you don't have to do it yourself or pay somebody else to do it, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I am, I mean, personally, I'm a bit stubborn.
Yeah.
And I, for one, like always have loved spreadsheets. And something that I appreciated when you came into my business was that you helped take steps and processes that I data that I would copy and paste manually into a spreadsheet. And then you helped me put it into a ClickUp table that then tabulated automatically. And I was like stunned. And I think
Yeah.
it was just a reminder that we're typically conditioned to rely on the natural order in which we do things. And
Mm-hmm.
that and it's easier, right? And then we forget that, there could be a system that makes this even simpler and easier if we were willing to allow the support that is trained, well resourced in these areas of business, which, we likely have no business to be in.
For sure. For sure. Yes. I'm glad you said that too. Cause I feel like sometimes that's something that comes up for people when they think of systems, or like, see in my intake form and things like that, that people, yeah, they're worried about. um, Someone said it this way. She said, I'm worried about you putting in like steps to like check off that I did the step. Do you know what I mean? She did the step, and now you have to go tell another tool that you did the step. And so like that was like her worry of like, okay, cool. I know this exists. I know that this could be better, but you're going to ask me to go and like do this checklist or something like that, you know? And I think that just remembering that systems should meet you where you're at. And if you like spreadsheets, like what came up for me was like Airtable, right? Airtable is like a good, it's like a spreadsheet on steroids. So like even something like that would be an easier transition than going to something like Monday.com, or if you like very like you don't like anything like too colorful and too crazy, that way like Monday.com wouldn't be for you. Like just things like that I think um you have to work the system and not let the system work you when you're considering that. And yeah, and let go, just like any other area of business, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert in marketing, so I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let somebody like tell me, especially with like copywriting, like emails. Like currently I'm writing my emails, but I had somebody writing my emails previously, because I love to write, but like I don't necessarily like to write about operations.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes it's just a little boring, right? I don't want to talk about a step today, okay? And that's okay.
Hitting pause on this episode for just a moment to tell you about my absolutely favorite way for you to experience a taste of our work with ambitious empath entrepreneurs in our Unbounded Mastermind, the community for empath entrepreneurs to celebrate and be carried forward by each other's successes, get bespoke coaching, and supported by a sisterhood of values-aligned business besties to finally step into your quantum next level. Each month, we host an intimate, non-networking power hour within our mastermind community for you to have a behind-the-scenes experience of what it's like to be supported in our community. Join us for our next event on Monday, the 22nd of May at 12 noon Eastern Time by jumping on over to the show notes for this episode and grabbing your spot at unbounded-potential.com/podcast. I also hear in what you're saying, like just something I hear a lot with clients, that like as business owners, we don't want to be ruled, like we don't want to be told what to do or dictated by our systems or our employees. I wonder, like, do you encounter that when you're trying to help your clients offload tasks?
I don't know if it's like that they don't want to, not when I'm hired. I would say for the sales calls that don't end up clients, I would say that there might be a little bit of that. But I think once they make the decision to hire me, they've decided to let go of this area of the business for sure. But I do see that, they are a little bit worried about what the process looks like and if it really truly would help them, or if it's going to just like create more work, or if it's going to break. Like those are some things that come up. And so in my consulting calls, I do like, I have a team of 5 that I'm working with, and we do calls like collectively to get their feedback. And so they can make sure that I'm building it for them, which is also kind of part of change management. which has to be included when you're consulting for operations. But I think in those calls, like, just I do a lot of reassuring of like, this is for you. You want your sales process easier. You're doing too many steps by delivering X. So in order to do that, we are building out your sales system, and then also gathering that feedback. Like if it is a team, gathering the feedback for the team. And if I'm just working with the CEO, gathering that a lot of feedback from the CEO is just so helpful in like, and really digging in. And sometimes I have to dig in like 2 or 3 layers down, because what came up maybe originally, like they get in there and they start working it. And it's like, oh, well, like, what if this happens, right? Like, oh, this, like the system doesn't work for like this scenario, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, now that I'm aware that that scenario is common, let's build this out even better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, yeah, so those are some of the things that I have to do in just consulting. It's just a lot of reassurance sometimes of like, this is for you, like, and a lot of questioning of like how they actually operate so I can understand. And it takes me back actually to, if anybody that's listening is familiar, or if you've organized before, like your home, like I used to walk through, I used to be a professional organizer. Funny, red string,
Mm,
follow it back. So I
seriously.
used to be a professional organizer, and I used to be in people's homes, and I used to have them walk me through their process. So if I was organizing their office, walk me through what it feels like when you walk into your office. Walk me through what is, when you sit down, what do you necessarily grab? What do you like to see on your desk? And I do that in my consulting calls of like, let's walk through this process. What is happening? Where are you feeling the friction? What's the problem? Like, where's that at? So through the discovery of the intake call and the consulting, that's usually helpful in helping people feel a little bit more at ease. And I'm like, perseverance, I always say, like, is that's like a value of mine. So like if it doesn't work, like we're gonna make it work. Like we're gonna like figure it out. Because if something doesn't work like version one, like, well, I'm gonna ask like a million questions, and we're gonna make sure that like this is designed for you, and we reach your goal of like cutting down time or whatever it might be. So there's that too.
I love that. I mean, I love kind of putting the pieces together of all your professional journey and how all of those skill sets support the trajectory you're on. Because,
Mm-hmm.
I know in the past you and I have talked about that you also have some coach training skills under your belt.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, right. I can just appreciate how that skill set could really support you in getting all the layers of questions with
Mm-hmm.
your clients, helping you understand how they work, where they get stopped, and
Yeah.
and then helping them also talk through how a system would make their work easier, which would then naturally help them become more and more enrolled in the system. And I think the degree to which we have buy-in in a
Yep.
system is the degree to which we will work the system. So,
Yep.
which
All of that.
actually brings me to the next piece, which I'm super excited to chat about, which is your new business. Because,
Yeah.
um, I think last time we chatted on the phone, like you were, like I was just seeing your 4-hour day posts everywhere, super inspired by all your long runs and your dance videos. And I'm wondering, like, well, first of all, did kind of pulling back on your work schedule, did it create some of the creativity and envisioning of this newest business pivot?
Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that and we chatted a little bit before. I always had this like concept, even like looking back 3 or 4 years ago when I was so like a quick kind of timeline. So I started out as like digital organizing, professional home organizer, and then um, I got on this personal development like journey, and I wanted to be a coach and a motivational speaker, and so I dabbled in those areas as well. And then I hit this like crisis, or like what feels as a crisis right at the moment of like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, why does it feel this way? And I think that throughout that journey, there was this mission and this like concept of like what I really wanted to do, and like what just kept coming up for me. It was just like this theme. And I think that this year I just decided that I was not going to wait on like developing this like mission inside of me, or this theme that just came up. But I think that just like anything, like we evolve, our awareness just gets like, we become more self-aware and self-aware, and I just don't think that that process can be rushed. So do I think that the 4-hour workday gave me the space to do it? No, but do I think that it was part of the story in like getting to where I am today? For sure. Like, it definitely was. For me, when I was working 4 hours a day, it was like a quantum leap. Like, it was like my mind, like, sometimes if you have these like moments, you can feel like your mind rewiring, or you're like, I don't know. I keep like, if you're not seeing, I see this like little turnkey thing. And I'm like, it's like this unlock, or something happens in your brain. You can
Totally.
like feel it like, oh my gosh, like this new thing or whatever. But, so yeah, so I think that, the new business is being born. I don't think that it's like fully actualized in like the end result. Um, but where I landed is the Zero to Entrepreneur. That's the new business name. And essentially, like, I say that like I want to simplify the journey to like wealth, for the cause driven entrepreneurs. And I do that through like clarity, community, skills, and system. And what's interesting, and why I say it's like not fully actualized or evolved, is that I feel like as an entrepreneur, those are the 4 pillars that kept coming up. And when I sat down to like build this new brand, and I didn't even know it was, I literally had no idea that I was building a new brand. I was trying to rebrand my consulting business, and then literally this was born. And so it's so weird to me to even talk about it, because I'm like, it was just something that just poured out of me. But what poured out of me was that these 4 pillars of like, in order to go from zero to entrepreneur and like be, to get through those hard times in the middle of like, when you're not making money, when you're like, when you want to give up, when you're in these moments of pivots of like, you don't really understand yourself and you don't understand what you're doing. There's these 4 things that just came up. And that was, you either are looking for clarity, you need community, you need to level up your skills, or you need systems. And so my consulting business falls under Zero to Entrepreneur, under the systems, right? Because I'm still consulting with systems and operations, and I can give you the skill set. And then everything else, like the clarity and community and skills, like I'm bringing in, by the end of the year, this will be fully launched, but I'm bringing in experts, like a coach, to talk about how do you get clarity. And I'm bringing them into a space that's going to be highly, highly vetted. So not just like any Joe Smo, and bringing them into a safe space that any zero to entrepreneur, any entrepreneur can come in. And when they're looking for these 4 things, they can come in and get clarity, community, skills, like sales skills, right? We think about like entrepreneurship. A lot of us didn't have formal training as salespeople. And so if you feel like that's missing from your puzzle, from your pie to get you to where you want to be, then I want you to come to Zero to Entrepreneur. And I want you to know that when you come here, that the content that you're consuming is safe, and it's also vetted from people who know what they're doing, right? And so yeah, so that's like, those 4 pillars. So I think that's still being born. And right now, I mean, systems is systems, and that's where, my expertise will stay. And I'll bring in my friends to help you with. I will. I mean, it's so crazy to me, because even when I look back, and anyone listening, I'm sure that you have the same experience of like looking back on like all these building blocks that has brought you to where you are today. And when I think about community, like I have amazing women like you, like in my community. And it's like, I just think about like, I can tap into you and I know that you want to give back. And I know that if you saw an entrepreneur that was struggling, like you wouldn't just leave them on the side of the road. And so when I tap into my network and ask them for help, like I know that they're going to want to give and they're going to want to be there for these entrepreneurs who need these little things. And also they may be someone that, might be have had some success and they hit a stall or something, right? And they may be looking to zero to entrepreneur to get a mentor, a 7-figure mentor or something like. So I have this vision of like when we're in the journey and you reach a point of like when you have that low, that there's a peak and you have that valley. I want you to come to zero to entrepreneur and know that you're going to be taken care of by the community that we build, and you're going to get the skills or community or clarity that you need or systems that you need to keep going on your journey, because we have to. It's hard. So hard.
Totally. It really is. And I think humanizing the journey, humanizing your willingness to talk about your journey is something that I think is very connective for you and other people. And it's something I really appreciate about you. Like I frequently notice your willingness to be vulnerable on social and share about those peaks and the valleys. And I don't know if I comment nearly enough, but I really admire your willingness to share all about your journey, because I think it gives others permission to do the same and
For sure.
to have more compassion for themselves wherever they are along the way as well.
For sure. And I just think it's hard because I don't do it all the time, but I do it when I have a moment. I always say like a moment of like where I feel like a badass or something, and I'm like, okay, I could do this, right? It's almost like when I have my shield up, that and there's protection from people not attacking me, but like judging, right? And it's always in those moments of when I write vulnerable things. But I think to your point about people feeling like they have permission, or at least not feeling hopefully feeling less alone. It's because we don't talk about not making money and the months that we had to go through. We don't talk about not having the skills in our gaps, right? We don't talk about that. And I think the reason we don't talk about it, and maybe rightfully so, and I'm not saying I'm going about this the right way, but we have to present a different persona to, and I think what we think is, and maybe this is true, I'm not a marketing expert, but I think what we think is that if we present a messy version of ourselves online, or incomplete version online, that we are not going to be taken seriously, or we're not going to be trusted, and nobody's going to buy from us. And then that taps into that, like, well, then how am I going to have a business, and how am I going to make money, and like all of these things. And so we keep those things gated. And I think if you're not a person who doesn't want to share, okay. But if you are a person inclined to share, want to support others in that way, then, I always say like, just share it. And as cliche as it sounds about like, everything will work out and your people will find you. I believe in that. It's work to believe in that, because it's still I'm still very much like getting my voice and learning that, like I'm in the process, right? I'm not like this, like I'm not Mel Robbins, right? Like this big thought leader, but I definitely know that at my core, transparency is a value. And I think that especially on podcasts and things like that, I always try to share the whole story. And I think that when people do tell their story, like I made 100K in a month, what they're not saying is that they have, a longstanding corporate client, right? They have this and this and this, and they're just trying to sell this idea. It's like, no, like I made 100, but like in a month, but I, have 7 years where like I was making under 20K, right? Like, and I had to go through that, and I had to
Totally.
and I just think that if we hear that, less people will give up. I
Mm-hmm.
really do believe that, Catherine. I think that if
Mm-hmm.
people hear that less, people will give up because people think something's wrong with them when it's not working. And I know that because I felt that,
Mm-hmm.
and I know if I'm feeling something, like someone else has to be feeling the same way. And I've spoken to other entrepreneurs who are in tears about not being where they want to be and like having to go back to corporate or do other things. And it's just like, you have to just bear down, bear
Yeah,
down and get through it. You will,
absolutely. I mean, one thing I'm both extremely proud of myself for um and have to lean into is like this idea of self-sufficiency. I am an extremely self-sufficient person. I can manage my emotional world. I have all the tools in my toolkit. Like, I am really great at self-regulating and like generating myself. And one of the consequences of being so self-sufficient is that I show up as having no needs to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this about myself. So in those moments where I am struggling, like, I know that other people aren't going to know to check in with me because I am very practiced as showing up as the strong girl, right? The one who always has it together. And so I love what you're saying because having uh having the willingness to be transparent about when I am struggling or when I need encouragement or acknowledgement or some normalization of where I'm at on my journey, like, I know that it gives permission for all those other highly ambitious, highly self sufficient empath entrepreneurs who are so practiced in handling their own needs while prioritizing other people, right? And so I I really appreciate you speaking to this. I think that it's a huge belief of mine as well. And just like I have a value around humanity, like just trying
Mm-hmm.
to practice being more human.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of the world that we live in today, the social media and the filters and
Mm-hmm.
just all of the artificialness of life can, and I guess I don't want to say artificialness, but I think I'm thinking of like, with the AI movement, like there's just so much less and less humanness in how we
Mm-hmm.
show up and in what we do. And I think that there is such a need for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I so appreciate you speaking to it.
Yeah, thank you. And I also think that they have this like saying, right? Like real recognizes real. And I think that your um the word that came up was consumer, but your audience, right? Your audience, they can tell when you're not telling the whole story. Like I feel
Totally.
that. And I think it's because people have been burned in the past that they're more aware of like, oh, this person presented this way. I bought into this person and I followed this person and I trusted this person. And then they were not that person, and then so I think that that makes people more aware of who they're trusting, who they're following, where they're putting their money and all of that. And I definitely am not a advocate for being transparent to the point where it's harmful for you, where it's like, you want to talk about your divorce or something like that. Like you don't have to like say everything, right? I definitely think that it's at your own scale and what you want to share. But I have to agree that you when you share and you become more human, like people really need that. And you can really help somebody, like really, with your story.
Well, thank you so much for today and for sharing your
Yeah.
story with my audience. Like, this has been such a refreshingly authentic conversation. And as we wrap, there's a question that I ask all my guests, which is really like, what do you think has made the difference for you in becoming a prosperous empath?
what comes up for me is compassion, identifying as an empath. There was a period in my life where I was like, no, I'm super cold. I'm super like driven and like this, this way. And I didn't think that I had a lot of empathy for people. And I think as I healed, I started to feel a lot for people. And I started to realize that the empathy was always there. It was just things I had to get through to recognize it. And so I think at this point in my life, appreciating that even though I'm a person that feels other people and feels them deeply, that's okay. I can be sensitive. I can be empathetic to others, and that is okay. That's okay. It doesn't make me like weak or like less driven or like any of these other things that I still wanted to be. And so compassion, I think, has helped me be prosperous. A little at the end of the last year and like this year, and I just embracing that I'm gonna feel the way I feel. And I'm gonna feel it all. And if I cry, that's okay. Because that's just, and not that everybody has that same reaction, but that's how, I identify with feeling and being an empath. And then just like learning too about it, I think has been helpful. So I think just accepting myself and compassion for myself has helped me be prosperous.
Beautiful. What a lovely message to end on. Thank you so much for today, Alicia. This has been a joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath Podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.